All right, guys, we are going to do 1.1 today, which is identifying points, lines, and planes. On this, we're going to talk about the basics of geometry, basically. So we're going to talk about undefined terms, definitions, postulates, and theorems. This will eventually allow us to have enough information to go over arguments and proofs. So you'll see this, what we call the state standard. You'll see this one, RL 1.1, in almost every section because we're going to always be talking about different terms that we don't know and trying to understand what they mean. So that'll be a pretty frequent standard that we're covering, but especially today as we get started because we don't really know a whole lot about geometry and we're just kind of learning those things. So just to point out a few fun things up here in these pictures, you'll notice the first one has this little straight, maybe you would call that a line, but then when you look over at the one over here on the right, this one has arrows. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. Some of these are different. This one has what we would call an end point, and then it continues on in one direction. So we're going to kind of talk today about what these things are and how you would tell the difference and how you would name them and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to show you a lot of what we were just talking about. So we're not overwhelmed by information. Let's go ahead and cover some of this up for a minute. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a point. A point, it actually has no dimension. So what that means is it's not like a 3D, it's not like a sphere or something that's jumping out of the page. It's just actually something that is helping us mark a place. It's not necessarily its own shape. So I know that's kind of a weird idea, but a point is typically going to look just basically like this little dot, and then it's going to have a letter next to it. So you would say, if you were looking at this, you would call this point A. And then if you were also writing it, you would say point A. And we'll go over some examples of all of these as we get further into this. The next one we're going to talk about is a line. So the definition of a line is that it does have dimension, it has one dimension, and it extends without end. That means that it's going to go on forever in both directions. So a line is always going to go through any two random points. So in this case, we're going through point A and point B. So in other words, when you have a line, it has to have 2 points to go through. And then, so you can see on this example here, it has an A, a point A, and a point B. So when you see a line that has these 2 points on it, you can name that line using those 2 points. So you could call it line AB. You could also call it line BA. So the letters are interchangeable when you're talking about points on a line. So I could say line AB or line BA, and that would be interchangeable. They mean the exact same thing. The other cool thing, and I'll tell you this a lot throughout the year, mathematicians are very lazy. So a lot of people don't want to write out the word line. And so in order to skip that, having to write all that out because it's so long, they would do what you'll see over here on the right-hand side. They would just draw a symbol of a line on top of those 2 letters. So that would be pronounced line AB also. And then the one down here would be pronounced line BA. They both mean the exact same thing as writing out the word line in front of it. And then we have a third way of naming this line. You may have noticed there's an L over here. It's supposed to be cursive. But if there is a cursive letter like that out at the end of your line, you can also use that to name your line. So you would say line and then the L, which is what you see right here. The letters are points. We know that because they have little dots, right? Notice that the L does not have a dot. That means that L is not a point on that line. It is just simply a letter helping us name the line. So L is not a point. All right, let's keep going. The next thing we're going to talk about is a plane. A plane has 2 dimensions. So you'll see it's that this shape over here. We usually use this shape to look at a plane, but you can make a rectangle or anything else. So a plane is going to extend without end. So just because you see these little edges here, it doesn't mean it stops there. It can keep going in any of these directions. And so it extends without end, and it has to have 3 points. Do you see the 3 points on this plane? Points A, B, and C. And whenever you have a plane, you'll also see sometimes we have this big letter. So we're going to name the plane either plane M, like what you see this M here, or you can name it with 3 points. And so the 3 points that we'll choose are A, B, and C. Let me get rid of some of my writing over here. So you'll notice we had 3 points, A, B, and C. I knew they were points because they have little dots. So I can call it plane ABC, or I can call it plane M. Do you think M is a point? M is not a point. The reason I know it's not is because I don't see a little dot next to it. So one more time, you can name it plane ABC, and technically you can name it plane BAC if you wanted to, or CBA if you wanted to. So the order of the letters, remember, is not super important. So up here when we named this line, we called it line AB or line BA. Same thing with the plane. You can say plane ABC or plane BAC or plane CBA, whatever order you want, or you can simply say plane M. All right. Next, down here, we're going to talk about 2 new terms. The first one is collinear. I highlighted that little purple part there because it says line. Collinear is when 2 points are on the same line. So they are on the same, kind of like co-workers, they work together. Collinear means they are on the same line. And then coplanar, you can probably guess, has the word plane in it, is going to be points that are on the same plane. So an example of that would be, if we looked right up here, points A, B, and C are all coplanar. Can you locate some points that are collinear? How about up here? Points A and B are collinear because they're on the same line. All right, so let's practice some examples of that. First one says, give 2 other names for line. Remember, this is pronounced line, PQ. Now, before I even look at the picture, I know I could say line QP, because remember, they're interchangeable. But now let's look over here on the diagram. We have this line right here that they're talking about, QP. I see, though, off here in the distance, this little N. And I see that it doesn't have a point on it. It doesn't have a little dot. So I know I can also call this line N. Okay. Another acceptable answer would be to just write the word line QP. All right, next question. It says give 2 other names for plane R. So if you don't remember how to name a plane, I'm going to go back. Remember down here, we talked about how to name a plane. You can say plane M or plane ABC for this one. So let's look at our example. We could say plane R, or we can say plane, and then we need 3 points. So let's just pick 3 random points. Let's say V, S, and T. But it needs another name. They asked for 2, so we'll say plane, and then I can pick 3 other points. So let's say S, P, and T. Why did I not choose Q? Well, is Q on plane R? No, it is not. And so I'm not going to choose Q. All right, part C, name 3 points that are collinear. Remember, collinear means they're on the same line. So 3 points that are on the same line would be points. Oops, I guess I don't need a comma yet. Points S, P, and T. And then the last question here that we have is name 4 points that are coplanar. So 4 points that are on the plane. So I'm going to say points, and we'll just pick the 4 that are on there. V, S, P, and T. Also, something I didn't mention earlier, but when you have these two lines here coming together, they always create their own little point there at that intersection. So even if it doesn't have a dark circle there, you can say that there is a point there because you have two lines that intersect. They will create a point every time. All right, let's move on. So some more definitions here. First one on this page is a segment. This is different than a line. So a segment, it actually has two endpoints. Now this is important to notice that it has endpoints because when we were talking about a line, I'm going to go back. When we were talking about a line, it said without end, right? But on a segment, it says has two end points. So this is the big difference between a segment and a line. A segment is just a piece of a line. So a segment has two endpoints and includes all the points in between those two ends. So let's look over here in our example. We have a point A, we have a point B. So the actual segment would just be the portion in between here. Okay, so we would call that little portion there a segment, and we would name it either segment AB over here or segment BA. Also, like I mentioned, mathematicians are lazy, so they come up with these little symbols. You can say segment AB like that, or segment BA over here. So you'll notice the biggest difference between a segment and a line is that we have these symbols here do not have arrows on them, whereas on a line, if we go back, notice these have arrows on them. Okay, so that's the biggest difference between a segment and a line. Next, we have a ray. So a ray only has one endpoint. So if you look over at the example, it has an endpoint here. Now it does have an endpoint here, but notice that it keeps going past that here. So when I say ray AB, I'm talking about starting at A and going on past B. Okay, so the biggest difference on this one is that it has a starting point, but it does not have a stopping point. So when you look at the symbol here, notice the difference. One side has no arrow and one side does have an arrow. In this case, it is extremely important that you notice it always starts with the endpoint, the letter of the endpoint, and finishes with the letter that is not the endpoint. So in this case, if you look at our picture, where does it start? It starts at A, and then it goes beyond B. So that's why I have to have the A first and then the B. Right here, it says note. That is not the same thing as ray BA. All right, next. We have what's called opposite rays. So opposite rays are two rays and they share an endpoint. So I'm just going to pause for a second. It says we share an endpoint. They share it. So when I look at the picture, they're going to share C, point C. And they're going to point in opposite directions. So if I share C, I'm going to start at C and I'm going to go this way. That's going to be one ray. And then the opposite ray would be starting at C and of course going in the other direction. So when you look over here, you see that I have two rays named. I have ray CA and I have ray CB. They both start with the letter C, but they end with different letters. One's going towards B and one's going towards A. Okay, so those are considered opposite rays. So let's practice those next. So we'll do some more examples here. It says, give another name for segment GH. So if I look at my diagram, segment GH is right here. Starts at H and G, or has endpoints at H and G. So what's another name for segment GH? I would say segment HG. Simple enough. Next, we have name all rays with endpoint J. Now remember that means they actually start at J. So we would say ray J, and then we would need to figure out where it's going from J. So it's going to start at J. Where could it go? it could go to G. So ray JG would be an example. But it says to name all of them. So let's try another one. How about ray J what? Start at J. How about we go to F this time? Okay. Are there any more? There are. How about we start at J and go to H? Oh, so JH. And then I'm sure you can see the last one. We're going to start at J and go to E. So those are all 4 rays that start with endpoint J. All right, part C, which of these rays are considered opposite rays? So if you forgot what an opposite ray is, go back in your notes, or you could rewind this video and look at our definition here of opposite rays. Opposite rays are 2 rays that share the endpoint, but they go in opposite directions. So if I look here, let's start at J. What was one direction I could go? How about JG? So if I have ray JG, what would be the opposite of ray JG? How about ray J what? J, what's the opposite of going to G? That would be H. So these 2 are opposite rays. Are there any other opposite rays? There are. How about from JF and ray what? JE. Very good. All right. Next question. It says, are ray EJ, so starting at E, going towards J, the same ray as JE? So remember, JE would be starting at J and going towards E. Are those the same ray? Absolutely not. No, because one of them starts at E, right? And the other one starts at J. So remember, if they're going to be the same ray, they would need to start at the same spot. All right, let's move on. Next. Okay, so on this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about intersections, and I mentioned the word earlier, but to define it, an intersection of 2 things or 2 figures is the set of points that they have in common. So if you can imagine, if I held up 2 rulers and I crossed them, they would cross just at one little simple point right there in the middle. But if I had 2 pieces of paper held up and I put their edges touching, they would be touching along that entire edge. So the intersection is all of the points where that thing is touching. So we'll kind of look at some examples here. So the first question says to name the intersection of line YZ. So line YZ is right here, and line SZ. So line SZ is going this direction. Now, they want us to name the intersection. When 2 lines cross, that intersection is just simply one little spot. And remember, we call a spot a point. So this is going to be at point Z. Okay, next question we have, here, let me erase this stuff. Next question that we have is to name the intersection of plane Q, X, Y. So here's Q, here's X, and here's Y. Now we want the whole plane. Remember, a plane is like this whole rectangular shape here. So I'm just gonna color this in so we can kind of see what it is. Okay, we want to name the intersection of this green plane here, QXY, with plane XWY. So here again is X, here's W, and here's Y. Plane XWY is this whole back plane. So it's like this whole back area here, kind of back behind this. So where are these 2 planes actually intersecting, or where are they touching? Are they touching at point X? They are. Are they touching at point Y? Yes. Are those 2 planes touching at Q? No, I wouldn't say so. What about at S? No, because the green one is kind of coming out towards us. The blue one is behind. So I would say they're touching across this place right here, across the back top edge. And remember, it's going from X all the way to Y and everything in between. So it's going from X to Y. Now, is this from X to Y, is that a line? Does it go on forever? I would say no, it's only going from X to Y. So that's going to be called a segment. Remember, we use that little symbol like that. Or you could say segment XY. Could I say segment YX? Yes, I could. So any of these would be appropriate answers. Okay, next we're gonna do a little kind of abstract thinking here. So I'm gonna ask you to sketch on your own. So you can pause the video here and I want you to try example 3 without my help and just see how you do. So go ahead and pause. All right, so now that you have read example A and example B and you've sketched them on your own, so again, if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and pause me. Let's do these together now, and you can check my sketch with your sketch and see if we got anywhere close. So it says to sketch plane P. So I'm going to sketch a plane. I'm going to call it plane P. And a line N that is in the plane. Okay, so I need a line. And it's going to be in this plane. So I'm going to put a line. Remember, it's got arrows. And I've got a little cursive N towards the end. So did you draw a plane or some sort of rectangle or square shape with a line in between or on top with arrows? All right, part B, we're going to sketch a plane M. So M. And plane M intersects ray AB. So I need a ray starting with an A, ending with a B at point H. Okay, so I've got a ray. Here's point A. It's going to point B. And this ray is intersecting the plane at point H. So I'm going to put this little point here at A, and I'm also going to call that H. So it's kind of hard for me to describe to you, but basically what that's going to look like is imagine like a wall with a pencil shoved in it, right? The pencil is touching the wall, like maybe on the eraser side, and then the point of the pencil is coming out. The place where the point is touching the plane is point H, or where the eraser is touching the wall. That would be point H. So that's where it's intersecting. All right, now remember, I'm just sketching examples. Your example might be a little bit different than mine, but it should be fairly similar. All right, last slide for today. We are just going to recap what we are supposed to learn and make sure that we did. Remember, this is a very generic standard here. So basically at the beginning, we said that we were going to try to understand the use of undefined terms. So new terms to us, understand what they mean by looking at the definitions. We didn't really get to postulates and theorems today. So that's something that tells me we're going to continue to work on this standard because we didn't really cross onto postulates and theorems quite yet. We haven't really done arguments or proofs. So this standard, RL 1.1, is not quite complete. We'll have to come back in another section to do it. Here's your homework for today. I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and you can pause it here if you'd like to write these down and start getting to work on that. Hope you had a great day. Remember, you can always text me on Remind. You can always email me if you have questions. Feel free to pause the video anytime you need to. In the bottom right-hand corner of this screen, you should see a 1x. That means I'm going at 1 times the speed. If you need to slow me down or speed me up, you can always change that to a 0.5 to slow me down or a 2 times to speed me up. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.